Hello, friends. Melanie here. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. Or if you've been following for a while, thank you. I'm excited to share a bit more about myself. I'm a life coach and biofeedback practitioner specializing in a technique called HeartMath. My goal is to partner with others to reduce stress and overwhelm, helping us all live more fulfilling lives, present, open, and receptive to what God has for us each day with a healthy mindset. I love connecting with people of all ages. To learn more, visit my updated website at theunearthedlife.com and join the Unearthed Life community on Instagram and Facebook. Please feel free to message me with any questions. I look forward to hearing from you. Hey friends, can you believe we are close to the holidays? I have my friend Amy today talking about all things books and thought it was good timing to prepare if anybody would like to do gifts of books for Christmas. There's lots of insight, lots of information, so get a piece of paper and pen out and enjoy this conversation. Hello and welcome to The Unearthed Life. I'm so excited to have my friend and author here, Amy Dale, to join me today to talk about her life and her love of all things books and story.
Thanks for having me.
The first question is, what is God doing in your life where you know his presence, feel his love, and where is he moving you in the daily?
Oddly, or maybe I should say unsurprisingly, it is around literature of sorts.
Of course.
I grew up not liking poetry. And it was kind of a family culture of like, we don't like poetry in our family. We think it's stupid. We don't, like all of that.
Yeah.
It was kind of the vibe. But my kids love poetry and have kind of gotten me into poetry, specifically Mary Oliver. And so I have a book called Devotions, which is just like it's a fat compilation of a lot of different poetry by her. I mean, I can sit down to have time with Jesus and it's great. But man, reading those poetries I feel like it opens a different part of my heart and just allows God to come in a different way. So that's been really beautiful. And that's been one of the main ways that I've really felt God. That's been really good.
Do you have a favorite of Mary Oliver?
This is just an excerpt from I Happened to Be Standing.
Ooh,
is the name of the poem.
Okay.
And the poem is great, but this is about a wren that's singing that she noticed. And it just says, he was positively drenched in enthusiasm. I don't know why, and yet why not? I just love the way she takes the simple and makes it so absolutely delightful and astounding. And it's just wonderful. So
yeah, how she explains things are like different and beautiful and brings out just a different perspective of the picture.
Yes.
I think that is her gift, where she does explain things really well. So you get a different picture of a simple situation.
Yes. And I do find it fascinating that you can taking almost simpler words to write about something rather than being eloquent and, overly wordsmithy, you can just pare it down to simple words and it almost cuts into the heart more in a way. Mm-hmm. And I think she's really masterful at that. It's amazing.
Yeah, she is. Well, that is a great segue because I asked Amy to come to speak on her desires and where she comes alive with books. This woman is who I go to for any recommendations, and she remembers every book. It is astounding to me, the details that you can remember and explain about a book. And we will sit for an hour and she'll just keep telling me books for each person in our family might like. And she has read them all. So, and she loves the paper in her hands. I know that.
Yes.
Doesn't necessarily like the digital copies.
No, unfortunately, I wish I did, because I am dyslexic. I found out as an adult that I'm dyslexic, and when you read a Kindle, you can put everything in dyslexic font, which actually dyslexic font's amazing.
Oh, wow.
It's really helpful, and it helps my brain not get as exhausted reading, but I just really like the paper.
So it takes you a little longer probably to process.
Yes.
Which is, again, incredible that you challenge yourself in that way, that you want to do that.
Yeah.
So that is a piece of this story is I would love to hear where that whole love of books and your story, love of story. She's an author. She's written her own book, and where it all came from, childhood or young adult, and how the struggle with dyslexia kind of played into that as well.
Yeah. So as a kid, I grew up in kind of a chaotic home. Like, there was just a lot going on all the time. And, but one thing, my mom took us to the library weekly. And I think for one thing, it was a free outing. You know, we were not rolling in the money. And so it was a great free outing. And I loved it. I would get the max amount of books I could every time. And later looking back, I realized I kind of stayed in like the Frog and Toad sort of level of books for a lot longer probably than most people, but I really enjoyed them, and I could comprehend them, and I could read them. And it was just such a safe, peaceful place for my brain. And also, I think being able to go into someone else's story and try to understand, you know, even like Frog and Toad, and looking at their world and what it was like, those were some of my favorites. And so I always have loved books and loved reading, and it's just grown over the years. I did discover as an adult, when my own kids were getting diagnosed with dyslexia, that I was dyslexic, and I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. You know, it like really helped me understand myself better. I think I also still struggle sometimes with, I mean, honestly, it's gotten a lot better because I've read a lot higher level books at this point, to the point where I feel like, okay, I can actually read most books okay. But I do find sometime comprehension is difficult for me in certain books. Sometimes I will read and listen to the audiobook. Sometimes I will just listen to the audiobook because I feel like my brain's going to pick it up better. You know, it just depends on the situation. So I found a lot of ways to work around it. But reading has been a huge gift to me. I love story in all forms. You know, like I love comic books, graphic novels, movies, like, you know, musicals. Yes, all of it. I love stories. Sitting around the campfire, listening to people tell stories. I love them. I love them.
Yes.
So, and I think for me, it's really helpful. One of the things that I've noticed in myself in reading more is that it really does help. And I've heard studies about this, but it really does help your empathy and compassion grow. Because you're not inside your own story all the time. You know, you're living someone else's life and going, oh, wow, look at what they're going through in this tale, and what's happening. And so I think that has been really, really helpful for me to be able to kind of grow in that. Yeah. And the other thing I really try to do is read outside my genre. Highly recommend this. Highly recommend this. I think I actually use it all the time for everything in life, because I think we get unbalanced really easily.
Yes.
And we're like, we only watch one type of movie. We only go to one type of coffee shop. We only, you know, like there's just like, we are very much creatures of habit, and we get in a rut, and I just think like, I want to expand my like circle of thinking and the way that my brain works in different ways. And if I just go to my, you know, Narnia repeatedly, which I do, to be fair, but like if I just go over and over to the same type of book, then I feel like there's some ways that my brain is not going to get fed in the same way, and stretched sometimes in an uncomfortable way. There have been books that I've read that I've thought, this is actually really pushing me. But I'm glad that I did it in the end. And I feel like I grew through it.
Yeah. So I want to reflect on a couple of things that you had said. I know with my kids and I did not like reading when growing up. And I think it was forced and it wasn't enjoyable. And it was also maybe because I was reading things too difficult. And so it took the joy out of it because I didn't understand what I was reading.
Absolutely.
And I think that maybe was a disguised gift for you, that you didn't know you were still reading easy books, but you loved the story.
Yeah.
And you loved reading just in general. You didn't know that it was easy. And then you grew slowly into more harder books. But I saw that in my kids too, that I would try to get them to read harder books and they would hate it. And so then I backed off and just let them read the easier ones, and they started enjoying the books more.
I definitely feel, okay, so full disclosure, I used to, when I was a kid, we had an encyclopedia set and I loved to sit and just read the encyclopedia.
Oh, wow.
Now, I couldn't comprehend most of what I was reading.
Yeah.
But I just love to learn. And so that is definitely how my brain is wired. But I have found that that is the situation in most homes and most schools. You know, like even it honestly makes me really frustrated that schools give summer reading that is required. Because I'm like, sure, require them to read books, but why don't you let them choose whatever they want? Because the whole point, what you want them to do when they walk out of the school doors is love to read. At least that would be my goal.
Yeah, love to learn.
If you love to read, you're going to that's going to pay off for your life.
Right.
But I think there is a lot of pushing to read, harder books and when you're 15 and reading The Scarlet Letter, it's a little soul sucking.
Yes. My son's reading it right now.
Oh my gosh.
It is. He's having a really hard time.
Now reading it might be different, but it's just, there's some of the stuff. I mean, there's other books. They have some great books that they have in reading school. The Outsiders is S.E. Hinton. That's a great book.
Broadway show now.
Yeah, true.
Yes.
Yeah, it looks amazing too.
I know, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's, To Kill a Mockingbird, great books,
yes.
But I think that I definitely think you're right. I think it was a gift to me to just stay in the lower level readers for a longer time.
Yeah. And you didn't know. The other thing, and we've discussed this before, is with reading books, fiction, nonfiction, is this escape from life. And that's where you had also mentioned, you can read outside your genre to learn more outside of this world you're living in. Because we don't have the ability to go to Africa or go to a different country, but we can read and immerse ourselves into this in our minds. And it's this beautiful place of imagination.
Yeah.
That we can also consecrate and know that, with God, we can see beautiful things in our minds. And it's both a rescue and maybe a dreaming place. So I know when I'm stressed out and not doing well and I just need something good and easy and take myself out of this space I'm in, I always have one fun book. I call it fun book of just good story, and then a self-help book and one audio book that I can grab depending on what day, how I'm feeling. I do grab my story, and if I want just an exit for a little bit, and there's nothing wrong with that. To immerse yourself in somebody else's story and just get life, wisdom, or a different perspective.
Yeah, and I would love to speak into that.
Yeah.
One of the things I want to address is that you were talking about how when we're kids, we're pushed to read harder books and things. And I think as adults, what we do, especially, sorry, I don't want to target you, but Christian women... And anytime I talk to a Christian woman and I'm like, what have you been reading? They're like, well, I've been reading, and they name 15 spiritual books or self-help books. And I'm like, no. I mean, fun. What are you reading that's fun?
I think you always have to have some fun.
And I think the reality is, for me, not everybody learns the best through self-help books and spiritual books. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah.
For me, Narnia, honestly, has been my biggest reading fiction has been the biggest growth edge for me. Learning about God. I mean, honestly, I know it sounds crazy, but I think that we need to give ourselves permission to be more in story and less in this is what you need to do. Because quite honestly, I feel like we have a lot of that in our lives. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that you should not read self-help or spiritual books, because you absolutely should. Mm-hmm. I just feel like the proportion for most people is off. Yeah. And I feel like they're punishing themselves almost. It's almost like some sort of, like they're whipping their backs going, okay, I have to read this book because I have to be a better person. And that's true. And I do that. I try to read outside my genre and read books that make me uncomfortable and all of that, but also read stories that you enjoy and that push you in different ways,
Yeah, like you're reading poetry. Honor and everyone in that. Yeah, challenge yourself. Try to read outside. There is an expectation. I totally understand that of as a Christian, like that we are supposed to always like be improving and changing and getting to a better, different place. And it's not a bad thing, but it's the stress of doing it. If it's stressful, that's not where God wants you.
Right. And it is true. It's like what you said is true. Yes, we should be. And I'm like I always have, those books going. Yeah. But I just think like when I talk to most people, they just don't even put fiction in the mix because they're like, well, I don't. And I'm like, you know what? You're going to just stop reading eventually because there's no joy and there's no fun to it. Mm-hmm. It's just like growth.
Right.
And I feel like, if you're eating broccoli, you also have to have a piece of cake occasionally,
Absolutely.
I think it's kind of important to keep your soul happy.
Yes, I love that comparison. I also think it's the way your brain is.
Yeah.
Right and left. Mm-hmm. You got to cross that.
Yeah.
You got to cross that
and
because there's
yourself, some people are going to really not enjoy fiction. Yeah. And that's just the reality. And if that's you, don't force yourself to read fiction if if it's soul sucking for you, or maybe do it occasionally just to stretch yourself. But like, I just think there's balance, and I think it's important to, I just think that most people I run into are shoulding on themselves as far as I should read this book. I should read this book. And I'm like, what book would you really want to read? Yeah. Like what's fun?
Yeah. And what speaks to your heart and is just a lighthearted ability to take a step back and also into somebody else's story and just enjoy learning. Because that's how we do learn. Like, I love story too. I love hearing how other people have lived their lives and overcome. And you don't get to hear that in a creative style if you don't either listen or go to a play or push yourself in reading something that's something you probably wouldn't pick up.
Right. And it took me a while, to be honest. I have a very strong sense of like right and wrong. And it took me a while. I heard John Green. Because I did not go to college. I only finished high school. And I have really longed for more education as far as literature. Mm-hmm. So John Green has Crash Course on YouTube. So I did his Crash Course literature course and just read whatever book was on the list and then would watch his video analyzing that book.
Wow.
It was so fun. I loved it. Except for Beloved by Toni Morrison. Beautifully written book, wonderful, but it was so difficult. I did not enjoy that book. I mean, it's not meant to be enjoyable, but that's a whole other subject. But I think he said something in one of his things, and I'm going to misquote it, but it's basically like a character doesn't have to be good, like morally, like good, like a good person to be an interesting character.
Oh, yeah.
And the reality is there are people that make bad choices all the time in life. And it's just kind of helpful to get into their heads and just kind of, I mean, I find it, now that I've loosened up a bit in my reading and been like, okay, it's okay for the characters not to be perfect because that's our reality we live in. Mm-hmm. And I actually find them very interesting.
Yeah. I love that you still are learning and finding enjoyment in the area of books, and you're doing on your own what high schoolers are doing with torture and college students.
I know.
Torturing them. They feel like it's torture.
I know. And every time I meet like a student of any kind, I'm like, oh, are you taking a literature class of any kind? What are you reading? Tell me what you're reading and tell me about it. And are you enjoying it? And let's talk about it. So yeah, that's even my neighbor kids, like my 10-year-old neighbor. I'm like, what are you reading this year?
Yeah. That's what everybody has learned and knows. If they know Amy, we talk about books, and writing and good things. I would love to hear some of your recommendations in those genres. I know you have recommended like things for our teenagers and also for me. And what are your favorites? I know that's a big ask. You have. Okay, tell people how many books you read, like for a year.
Well, okay, so I'm not a fast reader probably because of the dyslexia. So I feel like if I was a fast reader, this would be, I mean, I know people who read 100 books in a year, and I am not hitting that. I'm usually hitting like around 50.
That's still a lot.
And I totally do a combination of audiobooks and books. And I don't find a lot of people when they talk to me, I'm like, what books are you reading? They're like, well, I'm listening to one. And I'm like, that totally counts. As someone with dyslexic kids, it 100% counts to listen to a book. Like, it's fine. You're not like getting less points. It's fine.
That's right. You're still learning.
Your grade is not diminished. It's fine.
And it's actually a really good different skill to listen.
It is.
And to process and read and process and do them together is a totally different thing. To have a book in front of you while somebody's speaking to you and watch the words is really good for your brain, actually.
Another thing that I've done before, like for instance, I really wanted to read Dune. And this is before the movie came out. And I was like, I really want to read this book because I've heard a lot about it. It's like a classic, sci-fi, whatever. And so I went, or fantasy. I don't know, which was it? Which would it be considered? Maybe more sci-fi?
Sci-fi.
Yeah. So I decided to read it. I listened to every chapter on audiobook, and then I would go find the Spark Notes and read the description of what I just read, because it's so foreign, and all the new words and all the new things, culture in this book that are happening. I would listen to a chapter and be like, well, I'm not sure of what I just listened to. So sometimes, and I just didn't, like you could feel, I think I could have allowed myself to feel a lot of shame around that. Like, I can't believe I can't understand this book that other people read with no problem. And I just think it's fine. We're all at different levels, and it's okay if you have to read a chapter and then read the Spark Notes for that chapter and go,
absolutely.
Oh, okay, this is what I read. Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yes, absolutely.
I have missed major plot points before or misunderstood them. And so, I was just going to say one, and I don't want to spoiler alert anybody, but there's a big twist in like Ender's Game, for instance. And I remember when I read that book, I read just over it. And then I went back like 4 times and read it again because I kept thinking, and
that didn't make sense.
I did the same thing in a Snape scene in the 7th Harry Potter book. And I was like, I think I'm reading that wrong. So I kept going back and reading it again because I've done that before. I've read things wrong and then been like, oh, oops. Yeah. So anyway, so however you need to read it, it doesn't matter. It's fine. Yeah. Okay. I have tried to pare down my recommendations. Let me just tell you,
which I love.
This is hard. This is hard for me to pare them down. I listen to Narnia 100% of the time. Like, I'm listening to The Women by Kristen Hanna right now. I haven't finished it. That's a book I'm listening to. So I listen to some other audiobook during the day, but at night I'm always listening to Narnia. I'm going through the series all the time.
So how many times do you think you've listened to it?
No idea. A lot of times.
Like more than 50?
I don't know. Wow. I have no idea. But there are 7 books, so it takes a while to get through the whole series.
It does.
The Harry Potter series, obviously, I just listened to the British versions with Stephen Fry reading. Really enjoyed those. They're now on Audible here. I was very excited.
Ooh, that's cool.
Mm-hmm. One of my other top books is The Tale of Despereaux by Kate DiCamillo.
I remember
it's anything else by Kate DiCamillo, honestly. But The Tale of Despereaux is just such a fun read. It's really fun to read out loud to kids or whatever. And it's beautifully written. And there's just moments that make me tear up. It's stunningly written. Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones is great and led me down a whole other like rabbit hole of her books because she's written a ton. She's a British author and she's written a ton and great, really fun, like series.
I love that when you read a book and you don't know the author and then you start looking them up and they've got a bunch of other books and you're like, yes.
Yeah. And I read that book because I love the movie.
Yeah.
And I saw that it was a book first and I was like, wait a minute. So that's kind of how I got down that rabbit hole.
Nice.
I also really like to read classics. Because I did not get a university education, I really like to hit what I missed. So some of the ones I have loved, Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky.
Wow.
Love it. Was surprised by how much I loved it. It was so good and gripping and, you know, just, the plot is not... there's not a ton going on. It's mostly internal monologue, but it's fascinating and so good. So
I have to admit, I have not read that because it seems intimidating to me.
It's fair. That is fair. It's completely fair to be intimidated by that because it's a big Russian novel. Yeah. But I will say after I read it, I was like, I definitely want to read more Dostoevsky. He's definitely got me hooked. And I did also read Tolstoy to just keep up with that sort of in that vein. I read Anna Karenina and I was like, and I don't want to read more Tolstoy.
Yes.
So, you know, it's not for everybody. But also Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut.
Okay.
He was in World War II. He was in Dresden when the bombing happened there. And so he writes a story that is very quirky. It's got time travel and aliens, and it's weird, but so fascinating. Especially, may I recommend that you go and watch the John Green video analyzing it afterwards. It's fascinating. Anyway, so good. Catcher in the Rye, I loved.
Oh, that's a classic.
Didn't expect to love it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just about a bratty kid that's like, you know, but it's, I don't know, there's something about it that I really, really enjoyed the narrative of. Nonfiction. Okay, here's the part that The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. It's a newer book and I'm an evangelist for this book right now.
You recommended it and I have it on my Audible. I've started listening to it.
I've recommended it to pretty much everybody I've talked to lately.
So many people refer to that book lately.
It's a fantastic book.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it. If you live in the world right now, you should read it.
Everybody.
Because it is so good. My spiritual book that I'd recommend at the moment is Practicing the Way by John Mark Comer.
I brought it up to ask you.
Love it.
Okay.
Love it.
I'll have to start that one.
So immersed in that one. I love it.
Nice.
I feel like that will be one that when I finish reading it, I'm just going to go back and start it again because it's just, there's so much in it. It's so good. Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. It's a series of essays and, you know, this would be maybe I did it on Audible. It might be a better audio book because the way that John Green delivers things, I think is pretty perfect.
Okay.
He'll start an essay about Diet Dr. Pepper, and by the end of it, you're somehow in tears. So he's masterful. He's an amazing storyteller, an amazing writer, and amazing at getting to the heart of things and just finding these poignant moments. And, you know, it's beautiful. Anything by Malcolm Gladwell, pretty much. Outliers, great one. And if you like historic books, Destiny of the Republic, which anytime I tell, I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and anytime I tell anybody about this book, they think that it's a Star Wars book, but it's not. It's called Destiny of the Republic, which admittedly is very Star Wars sounding.
It does. Yes.
But it's by Candace Millard, and it's about James Garfield, the president, and he was assassinated. But it's the story. It's just
nobody talks about that.
No, and it's a story that it's a fascinating story. It's one of the best historic novels I've read. It is
really
so good.
Okay,
so gripping. If you are queasy, don't read it.
Oh,
If you can't handle medical things, don't read it. She also wrote River of Doubt, which is about Teddy Roosevelt.
Ooh, that's a good one too.
Oh, see, that one I had a harder time with. It wasn't as gripping and it was more of a slog to me.
Okay.
But I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah.
But The Destiny of the Republic is just will grab hold of you, and it's really, really good. Biographies. I love biographies.
Yes,
I love a good biography.
Me too.
Probably my top biography recommendation would be Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. It's not even technically a biography. I think it's more of a memoir, but it's called Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. Get the audiobook. 100. This is 100% audiobook recommendation.
Okay.
He reads it and he's absolutely brilliant. His delivery is amazing. And he was born mixed race in South Africa during apartheid. So that's why it's called Born a Crime. And it's so good. Okay. Elon Musk, the latest biography by Walter Isaacson. Fascinating.
Okay.
Fascinating.
Okay.
These two are pretty me-coded, but Me, Myself, and Bob by Phil Vischer.
Oh, yes, I read that. I read that book.
I think it's just such a great book.
It is.
Phil Vischer's the creator of VeggieTales.
Yep.
It's just really well written. It's gripping. It's like the story of the rise and fall of a company, but it's also sort of his personal journey and his spiritual journey. And if you listen to the audio of that one, it's like Bob the Tomatoes telling you the story.
Oh, that's funny because he is the voice.
Because he is Bob the Tomato. So it's great.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. And also Jim Henson's biography by Brian J. Jones is excellent.
I've been wanting to read that.
But if you're not a Muppet fan, feel free to give it a miss.
Right.
It's more
It's our generation.
I love them. Okay, here's other. I have just a few more.
Okay,
I'm almost done.
I love it. I love it.
Okay, this year I went to Jamaica on vacation, and we were in this little house that was like a vacation home, and it had books there, which is always like, I always bring like 5 books with me, but I'm also like, but there's books here. What are they?
Ones?
So one of the books they had there was The Road by Cormac McCarthy. And I, earlier this year, maybe last year, read No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy. I did not think I was going to enjoy his books. Loved it. Love his writing style. And I've been wanting to read The Road, kind of, but it is very dark. It's very dark. It's a post-apocalyptic tale. It's super bleak. It's a dad and a son, but it is, most post-apocalyptic stories you have, the people are not doing great, but the plant life, everything else on Earth is thriving. This is a post-apocalyptic world where nothing is thriving. So it's incredibly bleak. There's some really hard scenes in it. It did win a Pulitzer Prize, so that will just tell you it's not very long, but my God, beautifully written. Okay. One of my top books. After I read it, I was like, wow. I don't know how much I can recommend it because it is super dark, but man, it's amazing.
Well, Pulitzer, it's probably written really, really well.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Body by Stephen King, which is Stand By Me. The movie is based on that book.
Oh, okay.
It's a fantastic character study. He does such a brilliant job of really bringing characters to life that you feel like these kids. And I think he's a brilliant writer. I'm almost always dipping into more Stephen King books. I try to resist and go other ways, and then I'm like, but maybe a Stephen King book. It's been, a minute.
He is so good.
Yeah, he's really good. Star Wars.
Anything Star Wars.
Just one recommendation. A lot of people who love Star Wars have not read the books, which is fine. I haven't read them all. There's a billion. But I will recommend, there is a trilogy. It's the Darth Bane series. Highly recommend. It's by Drew Karpyshyn or something. I don't know. Anyway, he it's a very dark side story, but so well written, so good. Most Star Wars fans have not read it, but I think they would love it. So that's my Star Wars recommendation. And to stay with sci-fi, a very accessible sci-fi, I feel like, is The Martian by Andy Weir.
Oh, I only know The movie. Yeah.
The book is excellent.
Okay.
Really, really good. And he has 2 other books that I know of, but one that I highly recommend is called Project Hail Mary. I think it's his latest book, and it is really such a fun read. Like, there's a lot of science in his books, but it feels kind of accessible as well. Okay, and then last 2. Okay. 5 hours later.
Love it.
There's 2 like that I've read that are kind of like sweeping generational sagas where you follow a family for multiple generations. Oh, wow. And I really enjoyed both of those that I read. One is As the Crow Flies by Jeffrey Archer. And he's a British author, and it basically starts with like a fruit seller on the street that then later their family owns a huge department store in London.
Oh, wow.
So, it's just the progression of their family, and it's so gripping and so good and so beautifully written. And then The Shell Seekers by Rosamund Pilcher, another one that's just multi-generational family. I think it's also British, actually. That's my pared down list.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, it's wonderful.
That's a lot.
No, it's wonderful. I think why I always come to you for books is you have a wealth of knowledge on this point, but you're also very unique in it too. That's why I just adore you.
Thanks. Same.
Your heart and your love of books is unique. It's something that God's put in you. You learn, you live, and you really enjoy, and you help others through it too.
Oh, thanks.
You do.
Yeah.
Like, everybody knows. Ask Amy. If you need a good book, ask Amy. But you've also, in your discovery of the dyslexia, that's also been where you've helped others.
Yeah.
You guys have been very verbal and honest about it. And I know other people in our community have come to you and been like, so what do I do? Like, we just figured this out. What's helpful? What would be good? And I mean, I even came to you with one of our kids going, he's slow. They're concerned about his reading. And you just had some really helpful things for us to, tools and the dyslexic font. I mean, if you don't know about that and you're having a hard time reading and you don't know if you're dyslexic, I would assume you would probably be able to figure that out.
Well, I feel like even if you're not dyslexic, it could be helpful to your brain.
Okay.
I think because the letters, I would describe it, are kind of weighted, like it's thicker at the bottom. So dyslexic people can flip, like for instance, the trick where you hold your 2 L's in front of your face with your fingers. And the people are like, the one that makes the L is left. That's how you tell which one is your left hand. Well, I never understood that because I was like, they both make L's.
Oh.
So, and that's like how did I not know I was dyslexic, right? But to me, I'm like, I don't understand. They both make L's, but that's a thing with dyslexic people. We just like to flip letters around and they can kind of go in any direction. And sometimes for me, they get very swimmy.
Yes, I have heard that too.
And so sometimes I'll use a bookmark. Sometimes I'll have to use a bookmark right under the line I'm under just to keep them in place. But I feel like the dyslexic font really helps kind of weight the letters, the words, so they kind of stay in place, if that makes
awesome.
Any sense.
No, I love the new things that are coming out all the time to help.
Yeah, it's great. And I think also just going back to joy. And I think, just letting your kids read things that are below their level for a while. And I think we're very much in a hurry for our kids to develop it a certain way, and ourselves. And I just think there's not as much of a timeline and a deadline, I should say. There's not as much of a deadline as we seem to think there is.
Yeah.
And so I think just relaxing a little and being okay with being a little bit slower in areas. One thing that has really helped, and I know this is wildly controversial, but one thing, my son is very dyslexic. Probably one of the most helpful things for him reading wise was video games.
Why?
Because there were games that he played that you had to read instructions on, or that you have to read. There's text.
Oh, yeah.
And then if you're playing online with other people, you have to read what they're saying to you. You know, like there's a lot of reading in some games. Some games have no reading.
Right.
And maybe no educational benefit.
True. There are those too. Maybe choose the ones that have the reading on them.
I love video games. So I was like, great. And I think that probably helped him more than anything, which is...
for him, that's awesome.
He loved to do it, and he wanted it. It was more motivating because he was like, I want to be able to read this so I can figure out what I'm doing.
I think each person is so unique. Again,
Absolutely.
Like whatever you enjoy, whatever works best for you, go after that. Don't feel any shame.
Yep.
Give yourself permission to find enjoyment, to find joy in listening to a book, reading a book, watching a movie with subtitles.
Absolutely.
We do that a lot.
I do that all the time.
Even with English, we'll put the English words on the bottom. And, even if you want to learn a new language, you can learn it that way, where you're listening to it in a different language and you put it at the bottom in that language. I think it's just fascinating how our brains work in that way too, that there is, like you said, there's research that shows reading, listening, everything is so good to keep your brain learning, growing, alert, sparking, getting those neurons to keep growing and being able to do things for longevity of processing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think, like my ultimate goal is always to read outside my genre and keep like a more balanced approach. And also I'm constantly working through, I have multiple reading lists that I'm trying to work through. Oh, it's like life goals, like the top 100 BBC books is one of my life goals.
Wow.
So I've been working through that over time. Like I'd never read Jane Eyre and that was on there, like there's just a lot, Pride and Prejudice and all these different books that I was like, okay, and I'm enjoying it, but it's not going to be quick. Let's just say that. But I'm also super into reading. So if reading outside your genre is like, whoa, way outside. I mean, like you're like, look, if I can read a book, I'm going to be super proud of myself. Just do that.
Yeah.
And if you have to listen to an audiobook, that's great. And if you have to listen to an audiobook and then read the Sparks notes to tell you what happened in the chapter, that's okay.
That is okay.
It's all good.
Yep.
Your brain is still growing and you're going to, have fun in a different way.
And I love how it sparks our imagination because there isn't pictures and it's whatever you create in your mind and your heart of what you're reading. And like we could talk about the same book and have a totally different perspective on what we read.
Oh, absolutely. And that is really fun. And I love having conversations with people about books. It's so fun. I will say the one genre, I was thinking about it. I was like, the one way I'm not well-rounded is romance.
That's okay.
My bad. I'm working. I did read last year. I did listen to like one of those Hallmarky Christmas romancy books that Audible offered for free. I was like, okay, this will be my romance for the year. So I did do that.
Okay, good. See, you're challenging yourself even with one book. That's great.
So if you guys have any good romance books that you recommend, not too sassy, please. I don't want any spicy books.
Right. No, that's good. It's been a long time since I've read one of those books too. Yeah.
And I'm also not great at reading what's popular in the moment. Sometimes I am. Like right now I'm reading The Women, which is very popular right now.
Okay.
But I usually am not. So I'm like, give me half a second. I'm reading, Pride and Prejudice right now. But when I finish it.
So Amy and I have been together traveling and we always stop at bookstores. And the first thing she does is goes to the classics.
Mm-hmm.
She will not go to the new ones. Like, I'll head out, go to different places in the bookstore, but Amy's going to head to the classics. And they're actually like really kind of cute how they've redone them and like sell them with these like really cute covers and like, or miniature sizes.
It's really problematic.
I know.
Because I want to own all the copies. Oh my gosh. So bad.
I know. She loves going in and then she's like, I want them all.
Mm-hmm.
I want them all.
I do.
Have to hold her back.
Yeah.
But, so fun. I love this conversation. I love that we can help other people discover new things, discover new books, and also books help us discover more about ourselves and who we are. And I love it. It's just another tool that we have and God uses no matter who we are to speak to us.
For sure.
But thank you. Always a pleasure talking to you about this and enjoy spending this time with you.
Same. Thank you so much.